Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I am really excited about my guest today, mainly because she's just a great friend of mine, and we never have time to just catch up and talk because we're both so busy. But so I was just like, hey, let's just get her on a podcast and we'll catch up there. So if this conversation goes to like not talking about real estate, just like us having a conversation, I apologize for that in advance. We'll get back to real estate eventually and stuff. But Melissa Asbury, thank you for joining us very much. I'm just so excited to have you on here today and pick your brain a little bit about investing here in Indianapolis.
Yes, Brian, it is so good to see you. I mean, I remember the conversations before you were the leader of the pack of the simple wholesaling company, and I see you on commercials. Like, Brian, what are you going to do with your life? Like, what are you excited about? You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever happens next. I feel like you and I actually have a lot of that in common. We're like, I don't know, where's the opportunity? Like, what can I do? What can I get into? We're both a little bit of that, just like to be busy, like to work, like to dig into, figure out, like the challenges and that type of stuff. So
we like to do very well and use our gifts accordingly. And that was one thing I remember in our dining room or kitchen. I had said to you, I'm like, something amazing is going to happen. You're going to be in an amazing place. You were teaching at that time. And Brett Snodgrass was also here, and it just all happened. So it's so great to be here with you. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. So let's give us a little bit of just who is Miss Asbury? Like, what are you doing, and what are you doing here in investing right now? And what do you got going on?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. So yes, my name is Melissa Asbury, and I am the mother of 3 little girls and a little boy on the way. So I think I need to share that first. A happily married woman to a fireman here in Indianapolis, Ben Asbury, my little contractor. Kind of. And we do real estate investing. So it's funny. We probably started this journey maybe 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And it was truly from listening to your guys' podcast. Like, I would be downstairs on the elliptical, listening to Brian and Brett tell sometimes really good jokes, sometimes terrible jokes.
That was all Brett. Brett was a terrible day.
All Brett. I mean, wearing ridiculous outfit. I'm like, what is he doing? But it kept me tuned in, and I learned so much. I'm like, what is this wholesaling thing? And so anyways, fast forward, I have, a family, a growing family. And I thought, like, this W-2 business is great. And it's a huge blessing, but it's not going to get me to my goals as quickly as I want to achieve them. And so you were kind enough and you sold us our first flip. I was so nervous. Like, we had no idea what we were doing. It was like 3 years ago. And
I think that was my, like, I had more anxiety over that sell and that flip than any of the stuff that we've done. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, they're good friends. Like, hopefully they're going to be successful. I know they will, but I was so worried about that one and stuff, but everything turned out great. So
there was such a creepy metal army man in that house. Do you remember that, like, soldier thing?
Yeah.
I think we stuck it in front of our window in our basement just so people would think like somebody was always watching them. But no, even if that deal would have been south, like, just to say it here in front of everybody, like, even if it would have gone south, it would have been our own fault. Like, you don't ever blame the person that gets you into the deal or gives you the deal. Like, it's on you to underwrite that, negotiate, make sure that the numbers work for you, and do your due diligence. And if you learn a lesson, awesome. You just learned a lesson.
And we've all been there, and we've all kind of learned through that too, of just like, really, that's the times when things go wrong. That's when you do learn the most. And granted, you never want it to happen, and it's tough, and you're going to get stressed out and anxious and everything. It feels terrible in the moment, but you realize, like, after, it's going to happen a couple of times, and you're going to mess up something here and there. And that's really the time that you learn, but you get better from it. So obviously, down the road, you're going to end up getting the gains and actually getting the return on the investment from those mistakes down the road and things like that. So, yeah.
And when you're not getting the deal and you're in those valleys, you're like, man, why aren't I getting this? Why aren't my numbers making sense? You become a really, really good underwriter. You become really good at looking at deals and navigating, like, okay, what does my number need to be now? Because the numbers in 2022 and even 2021 were not what you could offer in 2019 or 2020.
Yeah.
So the market's changing so quickly.
Yeah. What are you doing with some of those as the market is changing? And like you said, like what you would have offered in 2019 or 2020, you can't offer that same. You're going to get laughed at with that offer right now a little bit sometimes and stuff. So what are you doing? How are you kind of dealing with that, kind of, analyzing and kind of figuring out what you need to offer on properties and stuff? What's some stuff that you've done to kind of help yourself through that?
Good question. So last year at this time, we had 0 properties. Right now we have 6. So, and a lot of people might be thinking, like my brother-in-law, for example, he's like, Miss, what are you doing? Like, this is the seller's market. You need to be selling that. But in my mind, I always think about things backwards. Like when people zig, I zag.
Yeah.
So the interest rates are so low now that I can get a 30-year loan or I can get a super low rate. And so like the spreads for the cash flow are so great.
Yep.
So sure, I could sell it, but I'm going to be paying Uncle Sam however much,
Yep.
or I can take that asset, depreciate it, get the cash flow, build that up. And you just got to be patient. The power of appreciation is real. Gosh, if I would have kept a couple of those
famous last words from any wholesaler, flipper, whoever. It's like, oh man, if I only would have held on to that.
I know.
Like that's what it is. So
yes.
Yeah.
2 Carmel deals. They were townhomes we sold. I like still eat myself up about it. I'm like, I could have probably made an extra 30 or 40K off of both of those. But you know, you do what you think is right in the moment.
Yeah. So no, it's very true. And you did well on those deals. So I mean, it was like, there's nothing wrong with them at all, but it's just knowing that it's always what you know after the fact, and it's always hindsight and stuff. So
I want to exit strategies.
Yeah. I want to go back a little bit before that too. So you and Ben, you guys bought a property up in Westfield, and basically you bought it. It was a little bit of kind of half finished, but kind of a little bit of a shell too. And you guys started doing the work on that yourselves, right? Is that when you figured out of like, oh man, I think I can do this. I want to flip. And you realize that Ben was just super talented and like, wait, how can you do that? Did you know, is that why you married him, or did you know that going into this? Or?
Zero. Like that was all luck of the draw, as well as the curly hair for my kids. Like I had no idea. I got lucky. So, okay. So are you talking about the house we live in now or the first? Okay. Yes. Got it. So so we built our own home, 7 years ago, and we couldn't afford all the custom closets and all the things. And so we just did the shell of the house. And Ben, I'll never forget this. In the house that we owned before that, I'm like, can you like replace the dishwasher? He's like, I don't know how to replace a dishwasher. And so slowly but surely he just figured it out. He's like a YouTube ninja.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll be laying in bed and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what videos are you watching? And it's like old men cutting wood. I'm like, so sexy.
So, but he does some amazing work. And I love that. One of my favorite things that Ben shared with me is like, basically like whenever you guys did a new project on a house, the deal was that he got to get a new tool. I'm like, that's awesome. That's great advice for any husband out there, any wife out there that does the contracting work like that. Anytime you do a new project, just get a new tool and you can do whatever you want. So
it works out fantastic because I pay the bills, like meaning it always comes out of that account. So like, how did it get up to 7,000?
Yeah. So no, good stuff. And I know I refer to you as like the Joanna Gaines of Indianapolis. So that's like that's I think you do an amazing job, and Ben's work is great and stuff like that. So how did you go from, okay, you guys like, you finished your house and renovated, it looks amazingly beautiful, and then realizing like, hey, I think I want to get in and I want to start flipping properties and I want to get into that. How did that transition go, or what happened there?
Yeah, that is such a good question because I don't think I've ever shared this story, but I would just keep getting calls from people to do like their bedrooms or their kids' playrooms or their kids' bedrooms. And I'm like, this is all great, but I feel like I'm not maximizing my impact that I can make on other people.
Yeah.
And I felt like, how can I do that? And I felt like maybe by flipping properties, that's just a better use of my time. Number one, you're going to make a little bit more income. So that way I can do some more properties or take on more projects. And truly by doing that and then getting the rental properties, hands down has blessed way more people than working with one client for a month or two, redoing like their kid's bedroom, And it's fun. It's great. And that's why I do this little thing called a Flip Tip Tuesday, which is completely for free. And so I put that on Facebook, will be on YouTube soon, which is very exciting. And so I give away free content every Tuesday of little tips that Ben and I do to elevate a room or a space, whether it be in a client's home or our own home or a flip. So yeah, I just wanted to impact more people. And I felt like working with one person in one home, one project, I could do way more and impact way more people by flipping. Because as you know, when you're flipping a project, you have the contractors' lives you touch. You have, other agents that you're working with. You have the neighbors that you're going over to introduce yourself. And then they love you because you're helping their home values appreciate. So it's just such a cool journey.
Yeah, I feel like that's an underappreciated thing, or something that a lot of people don't talk about all the time, of like how many times we go into a property or buy a property and we're fixing it, or even we're just selling it, on our end and stuff like that, of how many times the neighbors come over and like, oh, thank you so much, or like, what are you doing, or they're intrigued by it, and just things like that. So what are some of those things that have kind of happened to you, of having those conversations with neighbors and just like all the good that has come out of that? Because that's, you're so right, like nobody really talks about that, but that happens like almost on every project, it seems like.
It's so funny. So I'll
Yeah.
just say, at a property that we own in Sheridan, the guy next door, gosh, he would come outside because we were like interviewing tenants to live there. And he's like, hey, so you got a lot of people over here and you guys have done a lot so far. So who are you going to pick? Do you have any idea? So I want him to be happy. So I'm like, well, hey, who did you think was the best? Who should be picked? And so he's giving me his take and then telling me his life story. And the next thing I know, like that next week, he's like mowing our yard.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you're amazing. Cause I had no idea. I mean, it was during that span in the summer where you just get a ton of rain. And then 2 days later, like they grow up like weeds. And so he did that for us. And then I just delivered him some cookies. You know,
Yeah.
you just have to show appreciation and let people know that you see people, you see them, you see their story. So many people are going through things these days, especially the whole pandemic stuff, that you can bless people in so many ways that we don't even realize.
Yeah. And such a great thing too, of just like when you're, especially when you're flipping a project and you have materials inside, or possibly even some tools or whatever it is. Don't recommend leaving things like that in the properties, but you need eyes on that house. You need eyes on like what's going on, and making friends with the neighbors and being, you know, cordial with them. It works out for the betterment of everybody in those situations. So
it does.
Yeah.
I remember a time where we hadn't even like turned on the water yet, but like the guy was coming over to spray off the house. We had to borrow water from the next door neighbor. And I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, give them $20, or hey, I'll deliver them dinner, whatever you need to do. And you just make friends wherever you go. And you're just, obviously people can tell if you're all look at me or what can I do for myself. Like they can tell when you have a generous heart or you're trying to bless somebody. And that needs to always be the goal. And when we do get in that mindset of like holding on to things too tightly, like that's when it honestly just starts to like go through your fingertips, at
Yeah.
least in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that. I want to go back to something you mentioned of your Flip Tip Tuesday. So amazing content, great content. If you're not following Miss on you know, Facebook and social media, and soon to be YouTube and things like that, definitely follow her. She has some amazing tips on there for that. Actually had a Dave Short, talking to Dave Short the other day, and Dave Short mentioned of like, hey, you're friends with that Melissa Asbury, right? She's talked about this. And like, I didn't know that, and things like, so even Dave Short, this experienced investor here in Indianapolis, is getting some great value from what you're putting out there, Miss. So definitely appreciate that. If you're not following her, like there's some great stuff going on there and things. And you see a little bit of her. That's why I like to call you the Joanna Gaines too, because you get that personal life in there. You got Kennedy in the background hammering some nails every now and then, or just running around the property and stuff. So you get some of that personal aspect in there and stuff as well. So on that note, like, how do you go about it? Like, so you're doing a little bit of everything. So I have on my notes here, I'm like, I want to ask her about like, how do you find the time to do any of this stuff and figure out what's going on? So you're still working a W-2. So, you know, you're flipping some properties, you got some holds, you've got 3 kiddos, you got 1 on the way, you've got Ben, who's just another kid. And so how do you find the time to get into all this stuff and really give, I guess, a little bit of yourself to everything?
Yeah. So that is probably the number one question I get, because people are like, I don't know how you do it. But I think with the W-2, I truly do enjoy my job. I really do enjoy who I work with and who I serve. And honestly, as long as I keep enjoying that, I'll keep doing it. And I think the companies have seen me as being valuable. And so if they value you, you want to stay on board. Now, real estate investing, I'm very passionate about. So if it came down to something that I love and that I'm growing like an affinity and growing relationships with, like I love real estate investing, especially in the last 2 years. I feel like I've grown so much. But I will tell you, the first thing that you have to do is get up in the morning very early and run, or do the elliptical or whatever. And at that point, I listen to like either a podcast, or you and I, we both go to the same church. And so sometimes I'll turn on Trader's Point, like the YouTube channel, and I'll watch Aaron or I'll watch Ryan. And that just gets me into the right mindset whenever I'm struggling or I feel defeated. Like doing that completely flips the switch in my mind of what I'm capable of doing that day.
Yeah.
So
it's so that's why I get a lot of people like, oh, what do you listen to when you work out? Or like, what kind of music do you like? I listen to sermon series when I get running, or I work out, I listen to sermon series because it works for me. That's what works out. It's kind of funny too. Of like, I don't know what kind of music I listen to anymore, because if you look at my like Spotify, it's just all, it's all podcasts and all stuff like that. So I just want to like continually just like fill myself with information of what's going on and
Gotta
things like
grow.
that. So
If you're in this business, you have to continue to grow, right? Because
yeah,
if you're not, and we're still doing deals like we were in 2020, you know this better than anybody with your large scale operation that you run, you have to pivot
yeah.
to the market. So yeah, I think maximizing the time. Also, if I feel like I can't get in a workout, like I'm literally getting ready upstairs. I think I shared this with Brett on this show. I'll be upstairs. I'll be doing like squats. I'll be like listening to Bigger Pockets, and I'll be doing my hair. Like I do it all at the same time.
Yep. So no, it's good stuff. I mean, yeah, that's it. It's when we're talking about this question derived from like finding the time of like, sometimes you
Yeah.
have to multitask and through that and stuff. So you have to be listening to stuff and like you said, figuring out what's going to happen next and be able to pivot, because in this business, you can't wait till things happen and then pivot. You got to be proactive about all that stuff instead of being that reactionary state and things. So just educating yourself and staying on top of those things, I think is great. So, and that's the thing too. I think a lot of people, you bring up Bigger Pockets, like it's such a great resource because you get a lot of things on there of like, they focus on, they kind of focus on some of the bigger markets and things too. So when they're focusing on the Phoenix and the Atlanta and things like that, any of the trends that are happening in those markets right now, it's going to happen here in Indianapolis in 3 months, in 6 months, it's going to come down the line. So those are great resources. So you can be proactive about a lot of those things because the trends they see is what's going to happen here in these, secondary markets and things like that, or not the major metropolitan areas and things. So I think it's a great way to do it. Yeah. So just digging into a little bit of kind of what you're doing. I know, so you've done some wholesaling, you've flipped some properties, you've done some sub twos, you got some holds and things like that. How do you go about deciding like, what do I want to do? Where do I fit? Or is it just like, hey, I'm going to try a little bit of everything and then I still don't know what I want to do? And how do you go about that? How do you figure out where you fit in and what I know you're passionate about real estate, but what part of real estate are you really passionate about, Miss?
So I think there's different ways that you can look at this, right? So some people are really good at one thing, like you guys nail the wholesaling, right? And I kind of want to be that person where like I'm awesome at one thing and I focus on that one thing, but I also see it as a benefit and a strategy to be kind of like a ninja in a way.
Yeah.
So like whatever deals come in, you guys do this as well with some of the deals you get in. You want to know, is this like an owner finance deal or a seller's finance deal? Is this something that I it only makes sense to go in sub to because they're just not that much meat on the bone, or they need money, or they're trying to help their credit? Is this something that obviously needs a ton of work, so I'm going to go ahead and wholesale? Um, you just want to be able to take any opportunity you have and to be able to slice it in the way that makes most sense.
Yeah.
So we just did that sub 2 deal last year, and it was awesome because I got to call the owner just a couple of months ago, Thad, and I'm like, Thad, hey, it's Melissa. And he's like, hey, how have you been doing? We've been paying his mortgage the whole time. We paid up all of his arrears. We paid his attorney fees. Like the house was ours, but we were paying his mortgage payments. We paid off everything. And it was such a gratifying moment to be like, your house is paid off. We've restored your credit. He's like, thank you so much for calling me. Like, this is amazing. Because, people have baggage, and he went through a divorce and all the things. And he was just going to let the house go off to auction.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, that Friday that we saved it before it was going off to auction on a Tuesday. Yeah. So within 2 business days.
Yeah. So I think that's one of my favorite conversations to have, is just in general, whether it's that paying off the mortgage or just like, hey, congratulations on you sold your house today. Like you are going to be able to move in with your daughter down in Florida now, or you don't have to worry about like the ceiling caving in tomorrow, or just always say, I love those conversations, like getting the people out of whatever their burden was, or whatever that roadblock was for them getting out of those things. My favorite conversation to have by far. So
you're so right. Yeah. The bigger problem you solve, and I've heard this, the more money you make.
Yeah.
However, like I don't know, this is probably in my DNA, but like, I'm not one to like shortchange the little old lady, right? Like I just always give fair deals. We sent out 4 offers on Sunday afternoon, and I'm like, probably should be offering a little bit less, but I feel like this is truly fair, especially for this market and the potential of these properties. So,
well, I think a lot of times with that, if you mentioned that of like kind of the bigger the problem you solve, the more profit you make. It really just it comes about when you just focus on solving the problem. Everything else will take care of itself.
It happens.
So it's going to happen. There's a reason people say that, is because that's really the outcome that comes with that stuff. When you try to make it about the money from the beginning, that's usually when you start, you're going to mess something up, or because it
So,
doesn't come about solving the problem anymore. It becomes about the money in the back end and things. So
yeah, you're burning your own bridge when you think that way.
yeah, exactly. So with you being able to do, so if we take, we're looking at investments here in Indianapolis, and like you said, you're in a position where you can wholesale that deal. You can do a renovation on it. You can go ahead and do a full all out flip on it. You can, sub to it. You can buy it and hold it, any of those things. So how do you go about, what's helped you kind of understand of like, hey, here in Indianapolis, here's how I'm going to evaluate this property. Here's how I'm going to figure out the analysis of it. Here's how I'm going to pick my exit strategy. And number one, too, I want to give you props. And I think a lot of people, like you mentioned, sometimes it's great to just be that person of like, hey, I'm going to focus on this and be really good at this. But you've set yourself up in a way where you can pivot in so many different ways. You have so many different exit strategies you can do. So you can really capitalize on any lead that comes into you. You can figure that out and stuff. So, but what have you done on your end to kind of figure out like, hey, how am I going to analyze this? And how am I going to make sure this is the best exit strategy for us?
Yeah, good question. So I tend to look at zip codes.
Yeah.
Really. So like I only want to buy and hold in certain zip codes. So like we like 46241, which I've shared with you. We like that. Obviously you love the north side, but when you come across a deal, either you can flip it and make a lot of money or you hold it for the appreciation. It just depends on what you need that year and where you are in your cycle.
Yeah.
So we've kept those on the west side of Indy, some down in Beech Grove. When it comes down the time to flipping truly, I just need to look at like, do I need money? Do I need capital? And so we're looking at wholesaling 2 deals right now, one in Kokomo. Let me know if you have an awesome buyer. And then I think I'm hopefully selling one right now. They're walking through it. So in 46208. So Highland Place. So we get deals in, but right now I need to start wholesaling more because I'm realizing I'm trying to hold it. It would be amazing if I could get contractors to show up at the time and the day that they're supposed to. Like if I can put out like a dating plug right now, like my husband is tall, dark, and handsome, but I'll take any contractor in any form if you show up on the job and just do a good job.
There you
right?
go. I feel like I feel like there needs to be like a match.com for the like contractors and things like, are we a perfect match? Do we have the same core values? Can we work together and things like that? So
I think you just gave like $1 million idea. That might be Angie's list actually.
It is kind of, it is basically like, stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit better spin on it. So
it is. I literally need a match.com for an amazing contractor. Like we have a couple, but they're just so busy. So yes, when it comes down to knowing to wholesale, like last year, I was all about the buy and hold. I just was. And so we wholesaled just a few deals. And honestly, I was not spending my time in the best capacity. I was managing VAs. I wasn't getting to the leads quickly. They talk about speed to lead a lot of times. And I would let so much fall through the cracks because of my W-2. Like I feel like that's a sense of responsibility. Or I'm just with my kids tonight, where you really need to, if you're going to do this business, you need to take it seriously. You'll also be spending a lot of wasted money.
Yeah. And that's kind of the sad thing is like, you kind of focus, you think about your job and you think about kind of what you're doing and things like that. And like, it's time blocking is so important of like, where it's kind of sad sometimes when you have to think like, oh, I have to, I'm going to set I have to time block for my kids. Like, you have to be intentional about what you're doing. Like, it makes sense. So like, hey, I'm taking my kids to this project and that's okay. Cause I need to spend time with them, but I need to check on this too. And sometimes that's going to happen. Right.
I know. And I feel like I always get calls or texts at like 5:15 or 6:00 because they're in Phoenix or they're on the West Coast. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I'm just getting, dinner ready for my girls because Ben's at the firehouse. And they have to feel like a priority. Like for any women out there that are trying to do this, like, let me look right at you and say, put your family first. When you put your family first and when you get your priorities in check and you lay that firm foundation of your family that you're not going to move from, you are like so blessed. Like, I'm just going to say that you're so blessed. I was focusing on all the little things and trying to navigate my marketing strategy. I'm like, screw this. I'm zigging as they're zagging. I'm going to focus on building relationships, networking, getting out there more. And literally, like, I gave it to God. I'm like, I'm just going to put this in God's hands and see what happened. That week, I got 3 phone calls from previous folks that just weren't ready to sell. That all of a sudden, this was like 2 weeks ago, Brian. They were like, hey, I was just thinking about you. I think it's time. And I'm like, yes.
Yep.
Probably the sermon series that I listened to that morning on the treadmill.
There you go. So this, as it all comes back to, what you're talking about of, a couple of things here. We just talked a little bit ago about, when you make it about the problem, not about the money. Yeah. It's the same thing when you're looking at it from the big picture. Like when you make it about your purpose, what's the whole purpose of you doing all this is to have a better, a better life for your family. You're pursuing your passion, but it is all about your girls and all about your family and what's going on and things like that. So when you make it about that, everything else is going to take care of itself. So it's when you're going after that, it makes sense too. And Miss, I'm going to go ahead and just let you know right now. I know we talked about this before. Make sure you have time because I'm going to break this into 2 episodes. So I'm going to split this off right here. We're going to stop this episode. We're going to come back and we're going to dig into those things like you were mentioning about like what in the world is going on contractors? How do I do this? Or how do I make sure that I stay on top of them or hold them accountable or just find a good one? And we might need just a match.com to be able to do that and stuff. But before we get off here, I want to mention one other thing that you brought up. And I think it's a great point to where when you're talking about actually, before we do that, I want to give you a chance to mention real quick too, just your podcast of what you have going on and what you're doing with you got your Flip Tip Tuesday. We also have a podcast called The Intentional Investor Show. What is going on? I want to give you a chance to mention that before we get out of here and on to the next episode too.
Oh, you're so sweet. So yes, thank you. So this last year we started the Intentional Investor Show. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube, and it's essentially Oscar Satillan and Keston Glasgow and myself. They're 2 investors. One's located in Chicago, the other one's in Atlanta, Georgia, but we're all at different places in our real estate investing career. So it's kind of fun to be able to put a different spin on things. One of us thinks very analytically, the other person thinks very like purposely and mindset driven. So it's just a great spin for anybody just starting out or looking to dig a little bit deeper. That's the show that we do. And
awesome. And where can they find that episode, or where are they going to find that podcast?
So yeah, if you go to YouTube and just look up the Intentional Investor Show, it'll just pop up. It'll be my face and it'll be the 2 guys on the sides. Or you can just go to the Apple Podcast or to Spotify and you'll find it. It's streamed pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, learn more about you or what you have going on, or just anything you got, where could they reach out to you, or how can they connect with you?
Yep. So super responsive. You can email me at melissa@thebuyinghouse. It's MELISSA @thebuyinghouse.com, or on Facebook, just Melissa Asbury. Instagram, the Melissa Asbury. I hate that, but Melissa Asbury was already taken.
Yeah. I like it. So, well, as an Ohio State fan, I like you get throw the on top of there. That's good. So I had to throw that in there for Benny. So
this is hilarious because I just opened up a Linktree. Have you ever heard of Linktree?
I have not.
Oh, I need to share it with you. It's pretty awesome. Right. And so I said, Ben, do you like the Melissa Asbury? He's like, no, because it sounds like you're the Ohio State fan.
Love it.
24 hours ago. So, you win, Brian.
Awesome. So, all right, we're bringing Melissa right back for another episode. So stay tuned. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod. Thank you.